this example, I'm setting up a SpendLab file with an existing NIH grant. I'll right-click on the timeline to set the actual balance for January 1st. In practice, I would copy and paste this from the university financial system, but here I'll just use $50,000 to make the math simpler. The grant's fiscal year starts in July, and I need to spend the money by the following July. Now, so far we don't have any expenses, so the projected balance is staying the same. But let's change that by adding supplies. I'll drag out a new block that represents planned spending for this grant. The budget has $2,400 per year. So importantly, I'll choose the yearly rate from the drop-down menu, which automatically calculates that $200 per month. The total amount of money for the whole block is shown here. So if I change the length of the block, that total will update. If I go past the grant end date, I'll see these warning symbols. Note that this $2,400 per year is exactly the same as entering $200 per month yourself. It's just a convenience if you like to think of it as a yearly amount. And I can confirm up above that $200 is being subtracted from that projected balance each month. Now let's record some actuals. A nice trick for splitting a block is to just double-click on any divider. Now we have a new 1 month long block, which we can use to record the actual amount spent in January. Let's say that was $500. And it's critical that we set this as a one-time expense, so it doesn't get divided by 12. We can validate that over in the totals. And we can see that $500 has been deducted from that balance. Another way to add a block that represents actuals is to shorten this projection and then drag a new month block. Let's say February we spent $100. If you want, you could also update the projection with any new information you might have. For example, if you know you've already stocked up on supplies for the next few months, you could shorten the projection to remove that spending. Or you could do the math on your own to come up with a new monthly projection based on the supplies budget. That's plenty of detail for most cases, but if the grant is strict about spending categories, you might want to track the supplies budget as its own separate funding source. I recommend using a color that's similar to the main grant. Just like a regular funding source, I'd right-click to set the known balance. Let's say there's $1,000 remaining for this fiscal year. And then I'll double-click to add the $2,400 for next year. I'll switch this example over to the new supplies budget. And then you can easily see if you've underspent or overspent. In this case, you'd also want to subtract the supplies budget out of the overall NIH grant because the supplies expenses are no longer being deducted from it. Finally, note that if I set the actual balance at March 1st, for example, expenses before that date don't affect the projection. So you don't need those expense actuals at all if your goal is just to plan for the future. You can just leave that projection block alone.